Are you saving so much that it's putting a crimp on your lifestyle? Today, we've got a smart viewer question about how much am I saving and am I saving too much? So let me grab Walt and we'll dive right in today.
Hey, we're back for another episode of Power Your Retirement. I'm Walter Stroholt alongside certified financial planner Steve Smith, and we've got a great episode on the way today, a viewer question that's going to dive into the interesting side of the equation. Often it's, am I saving too little for retirement? Well, we're flipping that the other direction and asking, am I saving too much for retirement? Is that a problem? So, Steve, let's get into the nitty and gritty of Dennis's question here. He says, my wife and I bring over $300,000 per year in our income. We max out our two 401ks, an HSA, a 457B, and still put away more into brokerage accounts. Yet I still feel like we're living paycheck to paycheck sometimes. We're also not living in our dream home because I've prioritized retirement savings instead of putting a bigger chunk aside for a down payment or taking on a big mortgage. So my question is, are we saving too much for retirement? Because it'd be nice if we could back off a little bit and live a little bit more in the moment. Interesting question.
Yes, I think that's a high quality problem for sure. Don't you think, Walt?
We'll take that problem, right? Hey, problems are problems. That's one we'll take, and we'll tackle that.
Maybe before we answer Dennis's question, we could maybe zoom out a little bit and what the real risk is of oversaving. Maybe we'll dive into that, because the real risk of oversaving, and this is before we qualify if Dennis is or not, is that in life, it's not just like this before and after retirement story. We have to enjoy it along the way. Because if we decide to be married, probably want to go on some vacations along the way. If we decide to have children, we probably want to have enough room so we're not all living in the studio apartment still, right? So there's some things that, and goals and benchmarks. There's college, there's private school, there's all these different choices that we can make. Do we have a boat or do we not? So oversaving can kind of flush all of that lifestyle away, and it can almost make you a little jaded and not like the idea of money, even because all of that unnecessary sacrifice is not going to overcompensate into this lavish retirement when all of that life is already in the rear view. So it's oversaving is not a good thing unless you've already got all of your goals planned.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I look at this too from a generational standpoint. There may be folks who kind of saw their parents save and save and save and make sacrifices along the way throughout their lives, and maybe didn't get to have some of that fun along the way, or as much as maybe the younger generation thinks they should have. And perhaps there's an overcorrection the other direction, where now that older generation's looking back and saying, whoa, you guys spend a lot. You should save some for the future and be careful and make sure that you're taking care of that retirement plan and thinking long term. And so it's interesting. And I bet that younger generation is sometimes learning from the prior generation of trying to spend a little bit earlier in life and enjoy that. I felt personally that rat race, I guess, the save everything I can until I get to retirement and then I'll have fun. Sometimes I feel that mental pull and have to actively fight against it, I guess.
Yes, I had a couple in here that's mid-70s. They've been clients for a long time, and they were lamenting a little bit, or they were expressing that. This wasn't prompted by me. This was just in conversation. But they were saying, yeah, we've got all this money now, and we give most of it away. We don't even need it for lifestyle because we own everything we want to own, and we go and do, and all that just comes through normal channels. So they really enjoy that part. But they were talking about, man, we could have had a lot of fun if we would have had a little ski boat when the kids were younger. Or we always said we were going to go to Disney World and we only got to Disneyland. If we would have taken that trip, we'd have those pictures and those memories. But so it is a real risk.
Yeah, there's a balance that you've got to strike because you can't overspend on the other side either. So, again, before we dive specifically into this question from Dennis, I would imagine a big part of the equation is figuring out, am I on schedule? Because that's what this question really speaks to me. They're saying like, hey, am I like gut check or pulse check? Can I pull back on the reins a little bit, or do I need to hammer down still? Like, what's appropriate for me? So how can you tell if you're on schedule, behind schedule, ahead of schedule?
I need to really talk about the two sides of the coin here a little bit, because a lot of people will find their schedule from average benchmarks. And I'm not against benchmarking. If you've got an equity portfolio, you might want to benchmark the Dow or the S&P 500. Those are good things. But if you just do that all the time, then obviously if you've got a higher risk portfolio, you're always going to do better long term than the benchmark. You should, at least, hopefully. If you're lower, you're going to be constantly disappointed against it. So I caution people that don't just take what's out there for average, like target date funds are average type things that are like, hey, one size fits all. And also, there's a lot of benchmarks on percentages of salary out there. And I don't think either one of those are bad to have those benchmarks. But what they're missing out on is maybe the average person in that survey or that mentality is at age 67. And the vast majority of my clients want to get out at 60 or maybe 62 if they have to. Well, going according to that benchmark, guess who's not on track? They're benchmarking to retire at 67, even if it doesn't actually say that in the percentages. So it's very dangerous to use those generic benchmarks and those generic investment things, because if your goal is to retire at 60, well, then that's a whole different planning mentality, and you need to be ahead of the curve, not behind the curve or on right on that average. So I would express some caution with that when you're trying to schedule, and make sure that you have a plan that you're trying to achieve, because that's what you want to benchmark is the plan and the goals that you have, not necessarily something you found in whatever magazine or article or YouTube, whatever.
Yeah. Are there, Steve, any warning signs that we should be aware of that might indicate we're spending or we're saving too much? We're sacrificing today. We're maybe over-saving. Is there anything that kind of would be maybe a little light bulb moment for somebody?
So I would say if you don't have that lockdown plan and you've really taken time as an individual or as a couple or as a family, if you haven't taken time to really plan that all out, I would say take a look at where your money's going. So calendar and checkbook tell you a whole lot about your life. And if it looks like, you're not planning any vacations and you find yourself dreaming about them all the time, but yet you're maxing out like what Dennis is talking about here, you're maxing out and it seems like, your net worth keeps going up, but you're not enjoying any of it, or you're working so much overtime that it's causing financial stress at home, even though you don't need those extra dollars from overtime. That's another tell. Also, when you're sitting around and you're looking at your house and you really like it, it's cute and it's small, and it's like you got 4 kids and they're sleeping in the living room and you're frustrated, maybe you should take a look at making a few additional investments or adding an extra year or two before you retire, so that the kids don't need therapy on why they lived in the living room growing up. So
I like that as like a very tangible piece of advice for somebody, right? Like if you're maxing out your retirement counts and you have a kid sleeping in the living room, might be time to reevaluate. Like just a good little light bulb moment to look a little deeper at your plan. That's good.
Yes, definitely. And sometimes these things happen without you bought the house when you didn't have kids. Sometimes it isn't intentional. It just happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you bring up some good factors there. Is it okay to slow down retirement savings, and can you do that safely? And then let's get into the specifics of this actual question from Dennis now that we've kind of set the framework.
Sure. The answer is yes, but safely and slow down are they're not quantitative. Those are qualitative statements. So you have to be very careful. So I throw the caution flag even though it's not football season, we'll throw the flag anyways, to be very careful with this thing, because I don't want you to watch this podcast and or YouTube and have free permission to do anything just because Steve said so. So be very careful with this one. But yes, it is, especially if you've got some short-term major drag, whether that's from a funeral that you had to pay out of pocket for some reason, and then you had a bunch of out of pocket medical expenses earlier in the year, and it's putting some stress. You might want to slow down in that. Or you had, in my case, I had twins when we weren't planning to have any more children. Okay, so those change things a little bit in the plan. And it's good to reevaluate, what's going on, what you're spending things on, and it changes things, because now you got 2 more colleges and you got 2 more, all these other things along the way of raising children and the costs that are there. And I don't regret any of it. Don't take that. It's just we had to take a pause and we had to replan, because that wasn't in the plan. So not nothing bad, but those are different things. Sometimes they're short term, like what I said with the funeral and the additional medical bills, and sometimes it's a long term thing that kind of throws you a curve, and you got to stretch that out and change things over the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, sounds like the temporary pause is the part that's okay, or a temporary slowdown, like if it's to accomplish some specific goal. And this leads us into Dennis's question. Like, one of the things he mentioned was not living in our dream home. So, well, how far away are you from being able to achieve that? And if you pause retirement savings for X amount of time, can you then get into that dream home and then resume your aggressive savings rates? I think that's a great example that kind of plays into what you're talking about a little bit there. So Dennis has waited long enough. I know we can't always give the most specific answer on these shows without all the information, but based on his question, what do you think? Are they in a good position to maybe draw back a little bit with just how much they're pouring into savings?
I would say they most likely are, because they have a saving mentality. And a lot of times when you read these questions, even though I have not done a plan on Dennis or anything, I don't have the deep knowledge that I would need to give something absolute to Dennis. But if they are savers by nature, which it sounds like they are, they're most likely ahead in saving for retirement and achieving those goals that they want post-retirement. So I think a couple with that type of mentality, it would be good to sit down with them to make sure that they could buy that. And when you say dream home, is that a $5 million home or is that a $500,000 home? That's a qualitative statement we would have to figure out as well. But I would guess that somebody with a saving mentality like Dennis, what he said, would easily be able to upgrade a home into something a little more comfortable and age appropriate for the children that they may or may not have at home, or just for the 2 of them to entertain, or whatever the reason is that they'd want to have a bigger home with more upgrades, for sure.
Would the factors change at all based on, we don't know Dennis's age here, but would the factor change if he was in his 50s and 60s versus maybe somebody in their 30s, just to kind of give a little bit of distance to those possibilities?
So it depends. It depends on his situation. You always need a plan. That's where we always go back to. But just to give some commentary on the age groups by decade. So on the great part about the 30s is there's some redemptive time if he did have to pause. But also, as we know, that as money compounds, the more you can put away the younger, the further it goes, the less you actually have to save through those working years. So what I take the younger folks through is really their situation. Are they bringing into this financial plan what kind of debt? Do they already have a mortgage? Is there any school loans there? We want to make sure that we fair and balanced is really what we're looking for. We want to be, fair to the person, but we also don't want to get over our skis and crash the thing when it gets to 50 and they look back and like, whoa, we're way behind because we made this and this decision. So it's always moderation between spending now and saving for later. And the best way to figure that out is to know your goals, know your family plan, and work with a professional to make sure that those are planned along the way.
Excellent. That's helpful. And great question, Dennis. Thanks for sending that one in to us. Really appreciate it. Great job on all the saving that you've done so far.
Yeah,
Keep it up, but let's look for that balance, right? It's like anything in life. Let's strike the proper balance of living in the now and spending in the now versus, kind of being a martyr and just sacrificing it all for the future. Have a little fun in life along the way because, Steve, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. We can plan for it, but it's not a guarantee. So we got to have a little fun in life now. And
right.
That's something I'll take away from this question and your helpful responses today.
Well, I'd tell Dennis one last thing, Walt. If you don't spend some of that money, I guarantee you your kids will. So be careful there. Save it for your retirement, but I would encourage you to spend a little along the way.
That's a great point. I love it. Well, somebody in Dennis's situation, maybe you're identifying with some pieces of this question. If you're not quite sure, are you saving too much? Or, of course, the reverse of this question, am I saving too little? That's usually the more common question that people have. But ultimately, the solutions are the same. Get a plan in place. Figure out where you are right now, where you need to be in retirement or into your financial future, and then let's see if you're on track by really looking at the numbers, not just the benchmarks that you might find in a news article or something like that, but let's really get down to brass tacks about your specific situation. And that's what Steve does with clients pretty much each and every day, putting together financial plans and strategies for retirement planning that helps get you to retirement and all the way through it as well. So no matter where you are along that stage of life right now, proper planning, it's never a bad time to start it, whether you're in your 20s or 30s or close to those retirement dates. If you'd like to set up a time to meet with Steve, you can certainly do that. Visit powerupyour401k.com. We've got lots of great resources for you on the website, ways to schedule a visit. You can tap into the toolkit that Steve has put together for you, specifically for employees of publicly traded utilities. Steve has very specific programs for you that unlock all sorts of great benefits and resources specific to the industry. So definitely be sure to check all of that out. We've got all sorts of information for you in the description of today's show to make life easy and point you in the right direction. Steve, thank you for all your help today. Really appreciate this one, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Walt. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
This podcast is provided by Powerhouse Financial Advisors, an independent firm with advisory services offered through Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc., PAS, a federally registered investment advisor. The information provided is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as personalized investment advice. PAS does not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of this information for your specific circumstances. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's goals, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments carry a degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any case studies, testimonials, or endorsements shared in this podcast are illustrative of individual experiences and may not be representative of the experience of all clients. They do not guarantee future performance or success. You should not infer any level of assurance regarding future financial outcomes. Listeners should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any investment decisions. Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Be sure to consult with your tax and legal professionals regarding your specific circumstances. For a copy of our Form ADV Part 2A, which provides additional information about PAS, including our advisory fees and services, please visit powerhousefinancialadvisors.com.